Hello, everybody. All right, so now we are ready to start talking about how language starts in young children. So we understand that their cognitive abilities are here and in place. And so when we're talking in this course, we're talking about children who are displaying normal or typical language development. We're not talking about children who are born with disabilities. We're not talking about a child who is born with Williams syndrome or Down syndrome or Turner's or mild intellectual deficits. We are talking about a child that's developing typically. When you go into the other courses, then you're going to experience a little bit more about, well, these things aren't always exactly like this for children who have disabilities, but you need to understand what's expected or what's typical before you can truly understand what delays are and how we recognize them and what we do when they happen. Okay, so just remember that, especially when you're answering questions in the test, don't talk to me about what a child with a learning disability did or your cousin with autism did, or that's not the intent here. The intent here is what are typical children doing. Okay, so just be cognizant of that as we're moving through this instruction, and recognize every child develops differently, true, but there is a wide range of what is considered normal. What's considered normal or average is so broad-based because children come to the plate unique. When I talk about uniqueness, I'm not talking about disability. I'm talking about a family's inclination to like water skiing or motocross sports, or a family's interest in classical music, or a propensity for singing, or a genetic talent for singing, or dexterity, or whatever the gift may be. Those are the ranges of things that make normal or typical development what it is. So a child's personal interest in developing motor skills, running, jumping, hiking, swimming, a child's linguistic complexity, that they are very interested in literature and books and talking, intrigued by vocabulary, intrigued by new things, interests in bugs, interests in animals. Each of these individual pieces of who they are as people make that broad range of age appropriate be what it is. Okay, so cognition's in place, children are learning language and learning developmentally appropriately. Well, there's a few more things that need to be in place for us to be sure that they are going to be developing language in the same fashion as their peers. One of those things are perceptual abilities. So there are 6 key perceptual abilities to developing language. First, the child has to be able to attend to speech. They have to be able to hear language and respond to it. Okay, they have to be able to discriminate speech sounds. They have to be able to know the difference between p and b. Okay, they have to be able to hear the difference between sh and ch. They have to remember a sequence of speech sounds. They have to know that k, a, t goes together, and that forms a sound. They need to be able to discriminate between sequences of sound. So k, at sounds different than k, ap. So cat is different than cap. And they have to be able to hear, discriminate, and see that these sounds create and are different in how they're or their representation within the world. They have to be able to compare sequences of sounds and decide whether or not those match up to something they already know. So a cap, a cat, and a can. Each of those uniquely different, and which one pairs up to their stored memory. And they have to be able to discriminate among intonation patterns, particularly in languages like Chinese or Mandarin, where intonation is a part of the phonemic system. Baby talk, or motherese, the way we talk to babies, is crucial in how a baby learns to develop language. We use emphasis in pitch, intonation, rate, loudness, in order for babies to gather meaning from the words that we use. We use lots and lots of repetition. We expand and extend upon what they say. We use a higher pitch than normal. That's why mothers' voices tend to be a higher pitch than men's, because it is the pitch that babies are more attuned to. And as we spoke about in a previous week in Nature versus Nurture, motherese is the language of the caregiver. So the caregiver uses exaggerated facial expression and intonation, exaggerated pitch, higher pitch, increased loudness. We talk about what we're doing. We talk about what the baby's doing. We use short sentences. All of these build the child's language skills. As we spoke in the very first week about how communication is a dance, a symphony of coordinated efforts between listener and speaker, we can't underestimate and underemphasize the dance between the caregiver and the young infant. It is crucial for the young parent or young caregiver to develop a dance with their child in their care so that there is a communication that is orchestrated between the two of them. They engage with eye contact, gesture, they understand each other's intricacies. Moms know how to identify individuals' cries at a very, very early age. This engagement between the caregiver and the child goes through some stages of what we call joint reference. So, when babies are teeny tiny, 4 to 6 weeks old, caregiver puts things in front of the baby. They shake a rattle in front of the baby. They put their face in front of the baby. They show the baby the dog, and then they use words. Oh, hello. Oh, shake, shake, shake. Rattle, rattle, rattle. Oh, there's the puppy. So those words that the caregiver uses calls attention to an object placed in front of the infant. Later on, the child starts to vocalize what with their own way of gathering attention in order to draw attention from the caregiver. So they go, ah, mom looks over and she goes, what, do you want some milk? What do you want? Do you want some peas? Is that your book? And the baby vocalizes or points in order to share an intent, to share a mutual understanding of a topic. As they move on closer to a year old, the child combines vocalization with gesture. So they point, or they clap their hands, or they go and they are indicating they want a drink of milk. And mom starts to get this, that those gestures and words combine together to have meaning. The baby then, after a year old, gains control and says, mommy, look, doggy. And mom looks, she sees doggy, and she says, yes, honey, the doggy's running. She expands on what the baby said. They shared a moment of looking jointly in the same direction. And these things are called joint reference. Parents construct the conversation. Baby says, mommy, look, doggy. And mommy starts to have a conversation about the doggy. Yes, the doggy's shaking. The doggy's eating. Don't touch the doggy. And the conversation ensues. So, baby has an intact perceptual system. The speech chain is working. There's engagement going back and forth between the parent and the child. And we go back to those very first moments where babies use a cry to gather attention. These cries are reflexive. They come out of a need that needs to be met for pain, hunger, tiredness, boredom. After a few months, these cries start to change a little bit. They vary. And they start to be used not just for meeting a need, but for pleasure. And those pleasure type sounds we call cooing. Cooing are vowel sounds. Vowel sounds like ah, ooh, ah, ee, ah. And those vowels are cooing. Cooing is a combination of vowel-like combinations that are used for pleasure, for self-entertainment, self-soothing, and they're done at the very young months ages. You'll occasionally hear a k or g just because baby's usually laying on their back, and they might inadvertently have the tongue in contact with the velum, and you might hear ah, things like that. So, but it's just in a cooing situation. From the cooing, you'll start to hear the insertion of a few consonant sounds. So b, p, t, d, those are the sounds that start to emerge. Those are the first sounds. And n, p, b, t, and d are the first sounds that babies start to use. This transition from cooing to babbling is called transitional babbling. There are three types of babbling. There's transitional, variegated, and reduplicated. Transitional babbling is just the occasional insertion of a consonant during cooing, and then reduplicated babbling happens next. Reduplicated babbling is where you hear ma 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 ma. They say the same consonant vowel combination over and over and over. Da 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 da. That is called reduplicated babbling. The sound is duplicated. Once they start to combine consonants and it becomes ba da ta ba da na da bum ba da ta pa be bu ba, that's variegated babbling. The consonants vary in the child's productions, and variegated babbling happens closer to when they start to use real words. When you hear variegated babbling go and the child is using it with meaningful intonation and inflection, we call that jargon. So jargon is a type of babbling that's marked by adult-like intonation and inflection. So it is adult-like intonations. It's adult-like questioning. It's not real words. It's real intonation, real prosody, real inflection. It's adult-like in its how it sounds, but they're not real words. It's called jargon, and it is a type of babbling. So you'll also hear echolalia at this time, where babies will imitate sounds that they hear that adults have used, and they'll repeat them, but they don't do it with meaning. We start to measure after about a year old child's utterances based off of the length. So we call that mean length of utterance, the average sentence length. So, and it generally lines up to the age. A 1-year-old generally has an MLU of 1, a 2-year-old an MLU of 2, a 3-year-old an MLU of 3, and so on. So we measure MLU, mean length of utterance, for a particular reason. We measure it because we want to measure syntactic and morphologic growth. We know that the complexity of a child's language is growing when we see their MLU grow. The purpose of the MLU is to measure the complexity of language growth, the measurement of their morphology and syntactic growth. That's the idea of why we even take account of how many words is a child using. You'll see MLU used throughout the field of speech pathology because it is a way for us to measure how children are progressing and moving language along. At 12 months, we expect first words, 5 or 6 words at 12 months of age. So we go through cooing, then transitional babbling, then reduplicated babbling, then variegated babbling. We'll sometimes hear jargon, we often do. Then first words, 5 or 6 of them by 12 months old. And then we look for what we call one of our first red flags. So the first red flag is first words by a year old. The second one is by 18 months old, we want a child to use 50 words that are understandable to a non-family member. So tutti is fine for cookie, Suze is fine for shoes, but strangers should understand them. So 50 words by 18 months old is a red flag moment. That's how many words we expect a child to be able to produce on their own at 18 months old. We expect by 22 to 24 months of age that they will start putting 2 words together. So 2 words together before or on their second birthday, not after. We wanted the first red flag is first words by 12 months. Second one is 50 words together by 50 words produced by 18 months, and then by 22 to 24 months we should start hearing babies combine words like daddy go, mommy look, bad dog, doggy run, my ball. We start to hear those 2-word combinations. Around their second birthday, children start to use simple sentences, and they start to put together certainly longer sentences than just 2 words. You'll hear a few longer utterances, but their average sentence length should still fall in that MLU spectrum of 2 for 2 years, 3 for 3 years. Again, we cannot underestimate or undervalue the role of the caregiver here, okay? The role of the caregiver, again, those trips outside the home, providing motherese, using opportunities to develop language, using literature in the home, reading to the child, not using technology in front of the child so that they're no longer using communication. In other words, not being preoccupied on their phone when the baby's there ready to talk to. Using complexity of language that's understandable for a child, not talking to a child like they're a mini adult. They are not mini adults. They are language learners. The caregiver also uses a language-rich environment, labels things in their environment, provides environments where children can learn new words and have experiences with new things, encourages them to practice new words like zebra. Never seen a zebra, then we practice saying zebra a few times. They provide things like extension and expansion. Expansion is when a baby says 2 words together like mommy go, they expand what the baby said, yes, mommy goes to work, mommy goes to work. And they will expand upon what the child said. Extension is they correct the child. So the child says, Daddy, night, night. They say, yes, Daddy went to bed. He's tired. So they change it. They change it and expand it with a correction. So expansion is just adding more words, and extension is adding more words and making them correct. And then thereby giving an example of increased complexity of language for the child. Interesting to note and very important as you move forward as a career as an SLPA, if you ever are in an environment where children are around and other adults are around, what I see happen often is adults tend to have sidebar conversations over the heads of children. Children do not learn language from sidebar conversations. So if you have young children, then you are responsible for teaching language. What is important to remember is they learn language from language being spoken to them, not language being spoken to between the 2 adults in the room. Particularly important in a preschool setting when everyone's having conversations about the weekend and people are not engaging the children in conversation. So in order for children to learn language, it's important to be present, to be mindful of where you are with young children and that they do learn language from language being given to them. All right. So there we go. It's important to know that sequence of how typical development happens in a young child. And I hope your wheels are turning in terms of, well, now you can start to see, again, that complexity of language and how anything can happen. And when things don't happen the way they're supposed to, how language can become very complex and how language can become delayed, disordered, and not learned in the manner in which we would expect it. So much to learn in such a short period of time. That wide range of normal gives us some leeway, but children who have missteps along the way and have interferences in how they learn, that we have some catching up to do as speech pathologists in order to get them to places where their peers are so they can continue to grow and learn language. Have a great night, and I will see you next week.